In 7 different localities across Europe, in mainly cities, but ranging from Poland to the UK, from Portugal to Finland, we met with groups of disadvantaged parents. Sometimes they were immigrants, sometimes just low-income families, and we wanted to hear from them how they experienced the accessibility of early childhood services. And they helped us a lot in understanding the different barriers, which are very often not measurable in official statistics. To begin with, parents told obviously about the financial obstacles. There are in many countries means-tested fees for early childhood education, but the way in which the means test is designed is often not very efficient. Sometimes families get tax deductions for early childhood services, but the poorest families escape from, say, the scope of these tax deductions because their income is too low to be able to deduct anything from their tax declaration. In other cases, there's simply no services available in the environment, and this applies mainly in, say, Central and Eastern European countries. Poland is an example where even middle-class parents have big difficulties in finding appropriate services. So this applies all the more to the most disadvantaged families. Simply having services available is not enough, we learned also. We were surprised to hear how poor the information was that people disposed of. Some people had completely wrong ideas about the cost, about the legal entitlements or legal obligations concerning early childhood education. So there's a great need for stronger information, better information to begin with, especially for immigrant parents, because they don't speak or read in the local language. But on top of that, there's a need for outreaching also. Sometimes the cultural barriers are so strong that parents simply do not understand what the meaning is of early childhood education in their countries, and very often they have no provision in that regard. And the awareness of the interest of early childhood education for the development of children is not something that we can take for granted in all families. On top of that, there's also some say we could speak of cultural discrimination. Many services are extremely monolingual and a priori raise barriers against people who don't speak the local language. And this applies both to parents and to the children. So it is necessary for local governments to make sure that in their services they have a multicultural staff, for example, or that they include parents from an immigrant minority into their staff so as to bridge the gap between the services and immigrant parents. We also discussed with parents the interest of, say, priority rules, because there are nice examples of services that explicitly target the most disadvantaged, and they provide a more holistic approach. And they offer not just childcare, but on top of that, they also have social services. They have social workers in the services accompanying the families. They have intercultural mediation, they have health services at their disposal. So a more integrated approach is very, very useful for disadvantaged families. So we would advocate not separate services for disadvantaged families, but specific additional services, if possible embedded within mainstream ECEC provision, but additional in the sense of providing more holistic support and also focusing more explicitly on the child's development in disadvantaged families. Part of our study was also an analysis of existing data sets which tell us something about perceptions of parents, how parents perceive the quality and accessibility of early childhood provision and how often they use such provision. And we learned from that because we could compare data from approximately 30 countries. We could compare the impact of the design of ECEC systems on the accessibility especially for disadvantaged parents. We learned from that, for example, how important it is to have a continuity in provision from age 0 until age 6. In Nordic countries where such an integrated system exists, usually there's a bigger emphasis on the educational dimension of early childhood education from a very early age, and those types of provision tend to be more accessible, more attractive to disadvantaged parents. And that's obviously very important for their children. They offer additional stimuli to the children. Another aspect is the importance of government intervention, government regulation. We observe that the age from which a government guarantees access to early childhood does matter, in particular for immigrant families, for low-income families. Regulation also relates to the quality of services, and interestingly, the higher is the quality, the more a service is also attractive and useful for low-income and immigrant families. And obviously, this is something straightforward, something you can expect. The better the government funds early childhood education, the more you see also equal participation of the lowest income categories. And this is hope-giving. It is encouraging for governments that their efforts are rewarding.